The autumn air was crisp, the kind that made every breath feel sharper than it should. In the middle of the park, two small boys sat on the edge of a weathered bench, their heads bent together as if guarding a secret. They were twins, Zach and Lucas, identical freckles scattered across their noses, identical blue eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. Between them rested a red bicycle. Its paint was scratched, the seat torn at the edges, but it was polished clean, as if they had tried to make it shine one last time. It wasn't just a bike, it was their bike. Their late father's last gift before he passed. "Someone has to want it," Zach whispered, rubbing his cold hands together. Lucas swallowed, his stomach growling, but he ignored the hunger. "If we sell it fast, we can get Mum's medicine today." His voice cracked, the kind of crack that told you he was forcing himself to sound older than 10. They watched the stream of people passing by, joggers with headphones, parents pushing strollers, men in sharp suits rushing to work. Every now and then the boys would muster the courage to call out, "Excuse me, sir, would you like to buy our bike? It's still really good." Most people shook their heads. Some offered a quick, pitying smile before hurrying on. Others pretended not to hear them at all. Each rejection made the boys' shoulders sink a little lower. But they didn't stop, they couldn't. Lucas bit his lip hard, fighting tears. "She needs the medicine today, Zach, not tomorrow." Zach nodded, tightening his grip on the handlebars as if he might change his mind at the last second, and pull the bike back into his arms. But then he glanced at his brother, saw the same fear mirrored in his face, and looked away. Across the park, a man had just stepped out of a dark car that idled quietly near the curb. He was tall, his suit pressed sharp, his expression one of focus, almost distance, as though the world around him was just background noise. His name was David Bennett. People in boardrooms whispered about him as the man who built an empire, the kind of man who lived in numbers, contracts and deals. But to the boys on the bench, he was just another stranger passing by. David adjusted his jacket and started down the path, his mind on quarterly reports and meetings stacked back to back. He barely noticed the chatter of children or the crunch of leaves underfoot, until a small, urgent voice cut through the morning air. "Sir, would you buy our bike, please?" David slowed. Something about that plea, earnest, fragile, desperate, made him stop mid-stride. He turned and for the first time really saw them. Two small boys clutching a red bicycle as if it were their last hope. The wind carried another swirl of leaves across the path as David's eyes locked with theirs. And in that instant, his perfectly ordered world shifted, just slightly, but enough for him to feel it. David stood still for a moment, his briefcase heavy at his side, his schedule slipping from his mind. He wasn't the kind of man who usually stopped, but something in those boys' eyes pinned him in place. Zach pushed the bike forward a little, his voice trembling but steady. "It still works. The brakes are good and the tyres hold air. You can ride it today," Lucas added quickly. "And it's special, we took care of it." David studied them. Their shoes were scuffed, their jackets too thin for the chilly morning. They weren't just trying to make pocket money, they were trying to survive. "How much?" David heard himself ask, the word surprising even him. The twins exchanged a glance, a silent conversation only brothers could have. Finally, Zach spoke, barely above a whisper. "Whatever you can pay, we just need it for our mum." David crouched down so he was level with them. "Your mum?" Lucas nodded, clutching the handlebars tighter. "She's sick. She needs medicine, and we don't have enough." His voice cracked again, but this time he didn't try to hide it. David's gaze shifted to the bike. It was worn, yes, but polished carefully, almost lovingly. Not something kids would give up easily. That told him more than their words ever could. He reached for his wallet and pulled out several bills, far more than the bike was worth. He held them out, but the boys hesitated. "We're not asking for charity," Zach said quickly. "It's a real deal. You take the bike, we take the money. That's fair." David blinked, taken aback by the pride in the boy's voice. Slowly he accepted the bike, his hand brushing against Zach's as the boy finally let go of the handlebars. Lucas took the cash with both hands, as if it might blow away if he wasn't careful. His lips trembled into a shaky smile. "Thank you, sir. This will help our mum a lot." David straightened, the bike awkward in his grasp, and watched them hurry down the path, clutching the money tightly as though it were life itself. He should have kept walking. He should have gone back to his car, back to his meetings, back to the empire he had built brick by brick. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But his feet didn't move. His eyes stayed on those two small figures disappearing into the crowd, their heads bent together in urgent conversation. For reasons he couldn't explain, David felt the weight of that bike in his hand as if it carried more than rusted metal and rubber. It carried their story, their desperation, their hope. And before he realised what he was doing, he turned to his driver waiting by the curb. "Follow them," he said quietly. The driver looked at him, puzzled, but nodded. David stepped into the car, still holding the bike on his lap, the boys' voices echoing in his mind. Something had shifted in him, something he hadn't felt in years. He leaned back against the seat, his fingers tracing the worn handlebar grips. "Let's see where they go," he murmured, almost to himself. The black car rolled slowly a block behind the boys as they weaved through side streets, their small frames darting between pedestrians. David sat in the back seat with the bike still resting across his knees, its metal frame cold against his palms. He kept telling himself he had no business doing this, and yet he couldn't look away. The twins finally stopped in front of a tired brick building with peeling paint and broken mailboxes. The kind of place most people passed without ever really seeing. One of the boys pushed the heavy front door open with his shoulder, and both slipped inside, clutching their money like treasure. David's chest tightened. This wasn't the neighbourhood of children who had choices. This was survival. He stepped out of his car before his driver could object. The smell of damp concrete and old cigarette smoke hit him as he climbed the narrow stairwell, following the faint sound of the boys' voices. By the 4th floor he found their door, faded numbers hanging crooked, the paint chipped away. He hesitated, his knuckles hovering over the wood. He hadn't knocked on a stranger's door in years. From inside he heard coughing, low, heavy, relentless. Then the whisper of a child, "Mum, we got the money, we can buy your medicine now." Something in him broke. He knocked firmly. The door creaked open just enough for a thin face to appear. Zach, cautious and wide-eyed. Recognition flashed. "It's him," he whispered over his shoulder. Lucas hurried over, standing beside his brother. Both boys looked nervous now, unsure why the man from the park had followed them home. David's voice softened. "May I come in?" The boys glanced at each other. Their silence lasted only a moment before Zach pulled the door wider. Inside, the apartment was small and bare. No pictures on the walls, no signs of comfort. Just a worn couch, a chipped table, and a few scattered toys. Clean, but stripped down to essentials. On the couch lay a woman. She looked far too young to be this frail, her face pale against the thin blanket. Her hair clung damply to her forehead as she tried to sit up, though even that small effort seemed to cost her. "Mum, this is the man who bought our bike," Lucas explained quickly, dropping the money onto the table as if to prove their success. David stepped closer, his heart tightening at the sight of her. "I'm David," he said gently. Her lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "You didn't have to do that for them," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I think I did," David replied quietly. Her cough rattled through the room, deep and painful. The boys rushed to her side, rubbing her back with small hands that shouldn't have carried so much responsibility. "How long has she been like this?" David asked softly. "Weeks," Zach admitted, his shoulders sagging. "She keeps getting worse." David crouched near the couch, the bike still leaning against the wall behind him like a silent witness. He reached out, carefully touching her wrist, her skin burned hot with fever. "She needs a hospital," he said firmly. Clara shook her head weakly. "No insurance, no money, I can't." Lucas's voice cut in, trembling but fierce. "That's why we sold the bike. We're gonna fix this." David looked at them. Two boys standing like little soldiers, refusing to give in even as fear swam in their eyes. Something long buried inside him stirred to life. He straightened, his decision already made. "Get your coats," he said. "We're going now." The twins froze, confused. "Where?" Zach asked. "To people who can help her," David answered, already pulling out his phone. His tone left no room for argument, and for the first time that day, the boys let someone else take the lead. The ride to the hospital felt endless. David sat in the back with Clara slumped against him, her breathing shallow, her forehead burning with fever. The twins clung to her hands, whispering soft encouragement, as if their voices alone could keep her alive. When they reached the sliding glass doors of the emergency entrance, David didn't wait for a nurse or orderly. He lifted Clara into his arms, carrying her through the lobby. The boys hurried beside him, their sneakers squeaking against the tile floor. "She's burning up," David told the nurse at the desk, his voice low but commanding. "She needs immediate attention." The nurse glanced at Clara, then at him. "Are you family?" There was a pause. David's life had been built on truth, on signatures and contracts, but now, without hesitation, he said yes. The word surprised him, but it seemed to open doors. Within minutes, doctors surrounded Clara, guiding her into a treatment room. The twins tried to follow, panic flashing in their eyes, but a nurse knelt to block the way. "Let them help your mum," she said gently. Zach and Lucas looked ready to argue, until David crouched between them. "She's in good hands," he told them firmly. "I'll make sure of it." For the next hour, the waiting room became their world. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the smell of disinfectant stung their noses. The twins sat pressed together on a vinyl chair, gripping each other's hands until their knuckles turned white. "Is she gonna die?" Lucas whispered, his voice breaking. David looked down at him, at those frightened eyes far too wise for his age. He could have offered a careful answer, a half-truth. Instead, he said what he knew the boy needed to hear. "No, she's going to get the care she needs now. That's what matters." Finally, a doctor appeared, his expression serious but calm. "She's very sick," he explained. "Severe kidney problems. She'll need dialysis right away, but you got her here just in time." The twins sagged in relief, but then the worry returned just as fast. "But how are we going to pay for it?" Zach asked, his voice trembling. Before the doctor could speak, David did. "Don't worry about that, I'll take care of it." The boys turned to him in shock. "Why would you—" Lucas began, but his words trailed off. David met their gaze steadily. He didn't have an answer that made sense, not even to himself. All he knew was that he couldn't walk away, not now. A nurse came over, holding a clipboard full of forms. David took it without hesitation, signing his name on every line. Insurance information, consent for treatment, he didn't flinch once. Hours later, when Clara was finally stabilised and resting, the twins refused to leave her bedside. They each held one of her hands, their heads drooping with exhaustion but their bodies refusing to move. David stood at the foot of the bed, watching the scene. Something inside him shifted, a feeling he hadn't let himself acknowledge in years. Responsibility, connection, a strange, fragile hope. When the boys finally fell asleep in the chairs beside their mother, David looked at them and realised the truth. His carefully controlled life would never be the same again. The next morning, Clara was still resting, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily by her bedside. Doctors reassured David she was stable, but warned her recovery would take time, weeks, if not months. The boys sat slumped in plastic chairs, their small frames dwarfed by the hospital corridor. They hadn't left their mother's side since yesterday. Dark circles shadowed their eyes. Their clothes still smelled faintly of the park. David lowered himself into the chair across from them. "She's safe here now," he said gently. "But you two can't stay in this hospital every night. You need a place to rest, to eat." Zach shook his head. "We're not leaving her." Lucas nodded fiercely. "We'll sleep on the floor if we have to." Before David could respond, Clara stirred weakly in her bed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's right, boys. You need sleep, you need food, you can't keep watch like this." The twins rushed to her side, gripping her hands. "But Mum!" A nurse stepped in, adjusting Clara's IV. "Your mother's going to need several more treatments. She'll be in good hands here, and you two need proper rest if you want to keep her spirits up." Clara's eyes flicked to David, uncertain but desperate. "I don't want them wandering the streets or staying alone in that apartment. It's damp, it's unsafe." David's tone was steady, certain. "Then let them stay with me, just until you're strong enough to come home. I promise, they'll see you every day." The boys hesitated, but when their mother gave a small nod, their resistance broke. By evening, the black car pulled up to the long driveway of David's estate. The mansion rose out of the manicured grounds like something from a different world, its windows glowing warm against the dusk, its doors taller than the boys had ever seen. The twins climbed out of the car, their sneakers crunching against the gravel. Their eyes widened as they craned their necks, taking in the sprawling house. "You live here?" Lucas asked in awe. David hesitated. Through their eyes, the house suddenly looked less like a triumph and more like a monument to silence. "Yes," he said simply, "but tonight you do too." Inside, the space swallowed them whole. High ceilings, polished floors, a grand staircase curving upward. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish, not of cooking or laughter. The housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, appeared in the foyer, her eyebrows raised at the unexpected guests. David's voice was firm. "They'll be staying here for a while. Please make sure they have what they need." She gave a tight nod and disappeared toward the guest wing. David led the boys into a dining room where a long table gleamed under a chandelier. Dinner was waiting. Real dinner, with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh rolls and vegetables. Food the boys hadn't seen in weeks. For a moment, neither moved. Then hunger won. They climbed into the chairs and ate with quiet desperation, whispering thank you between bites. David sat across from them, watching. He had hosted countless business dinners in this room, but none of those meals had ever carried this kind of weight. Later, Mrs. Winters showed them to a guest suite, each bed dressed in crisp linens. The boys stood frozen, staring at the pillows as if afraid they might disappear. "You can sleep here tonight," David said softly from the doorway. Lucas reached out, running his small hand over the comforter. "It's so soft," he murmured. Zach climbed onto this bed and sank into it with a sigh. Within minutes, both were curled under the blankets, their breathing slowing into the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. David lingered at the threshold, his silhouette framed by the hall light. He should have gone back to his study, back to his work, back to the quiet he had lived in for years, but he didn't move. He stood there watching these two boys sleep, and for the first time in a long time, his house felt less like an empty shell and more like something else, something alive. And in the corner, propped against the wall, the red bicycle leaned silently, carrying with it the memory of how this unlikely night had begun. Morning light poured through tall windows, spilling across the polished floor as Zach and Lucas explored every corner of the mansion. Their footsteps echoed in the wide halls, their voices hushed with awe. They darted from room to room like they couldn't believe any of it was real. By midday, curiosity had led them to the garage. It wasn't like the garages they knew. This one was spotless, with rows of tools, polished shelves, and covered cars that looked too perfect to touch. Yet tucked at the far end, behind a heavy wooden door, was a section that looked different. Lucas ran his hand over the handle. "What's in here?" Before Zach could answer, the housekeeper's voice carried across the space. "That part stays closed," Mrs. Winters said quickly, setting down a basket of laundry. Her tone was firm, but not unkind. "The rest of the house is yours, not this room." The boys froze, exchanging guilty glances. Mrs. Winters gave them a small smile, then walked away, leaving them with a mystery they couldn't shake. That evening, while David worked in his study, Zach finally asked, "Why is that room locked? What's in there?" David's pen stilled over the papers in front of him. He looked up, meeting the boy's wide, honest eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice quieter than usual, he answered, "It holds things I wasn't ready to face." The twins tilted their heads, confused but respectful enough not to push further. Still, their question lingered in David's mind long after they left the room. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the boys asleep, David found himself standing in the garage. His hand trembled on the key he hadn't touched in years. He turned the lock. The door creaked open to reveal a preserved world, a small bicycle with training wheels, a glove and baseball resting on a shelf, posters of planets tacked to the wall, and a bed covered in a faded superhero blanket. The air smelled faintly of dust, but the room itself looked frozen in time. David stepped inside, his chest tight. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand brushing over the blanket. Memories came rushing back, laughter, bedtime stories, a little boy's voice calling him Dad one last time. He didn't hear the footsteps until Lucas's small voice whispered from the doorway, "This was your son's room, wasn't it?" David looked up sharply. Lucas stood there barefoot, his face solemn, his brother close behind him. For a moment, David thought of sending them away, locking the door again. But something in their gentle silence kept him still. "Yes," he admitted, his voice rough. "His name was Thomas. He was about your age when when he and his mother died. The boys stepped carefully into the room, their eyes moving over the treasures left behind. Zach touched the baseball glove with reverence. Lucas whispered, "He must have been amazing." David swallowed hard. He was. For the first time in years, he didn't feel crushed by the memory. Sharing it eased the weight, just slightly. The twins sat on the floor, cross-legged, as if waiting for a story, and David, surprising even himself, began to talk. He told them about Thomas's love of dinosaurs, how he begged for bedtime stories about astronauts, how he once rode his little bike down the driveway so fast he skinned both knees but laughed the whole way. The boys listened, their faces soft with empathy. When David finally fell silent, Lucas spoke quietly. "Mum always says it's okay to be sad, but she also says we should still let ourselves be happy too." Something in those words cracked the wall David had built around his heart. His eyes burned, but he didn't look away. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a businessman, not as a name on a building, but as a father who had lost everything. And now, maybe, as a man who had something left to hold on to. 2 weeks later, the hospital called with news that Clara was finally well enough to continue her treatment as an outpatient. She was still weak, but the dialysis had stabilised her condition. A doctor advised strongly against returning to her old apartment. Too damp, too cramped, and hardly a place for someone needing rest. "She needs a clean, stable environment," the doctor explained. So when David's car pulled up to the hospital that afternoon, it wasn't just to bring the boys for a visit. It was to bring Clara home, at least for now. The twins were already bouncing in the lobby, their faces brighter than they had been in weeks. They rushed into her room, filling it with chatter about the mansion, the grand staircase, the huge kitchen, and how Mrs. Winters made pancakes that were better than the diners. Clara laughed until tears streaked down her face, hugging them as though she might never let go. Then her gaze shifted to David, standing just inside the doorway. "I don't want to impose," she said quietly. "You're not," he replied without hesitation. "The doctors are right. You need proper rest. The boys need you close. This is the most practical way." Clara hesitated, torn between pride and gratitude, but when she saw her son's hopeful eyes, she gave a small nod. That evening, the car turned into the long driveway of David's estate. The mansion glowed against the fading sky, its windows warm with light. Clara sat between her boys in the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "This is where you've been staying," she whispered. Lucas grinned. "Wait until you see the library, Mom. It's bigger than our whole apartment." Zach nodded eagerly. "And the beds feel like clouds." Clara shook her head in disbelief as David opened the door for her. She stepped inside and paused, overwhelmed by the vast entryway. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, the polished floors gleamed. But what struck her most was the silence, until Zach's excited voice filled it as he pulled her toward the grand staircase. That night, for the first time, they all sat down at the dining table together. The boys could barely stop talking, updating their mother on everything they had discovered. The gardens, the chess lessons David had reluctantly begun, the telescope in his study. Clara's gaze lingered on them, then shifted to David. "You've been teaching them?" she asked softly. David cleared his throat, almost uncomfortable. "They asked. It seemed important." Lucas beamed. "He's really good, Mom. He says we're fast learners." Clara smiled, brushing her hand over her son's hair. For the first time in months, they looked like children again, safe, carefree, full of light. After dinner, when the boys had gone upstairs with Mrs. Winters, Clara wandered into the library. She stood in front of a row of framed photographs, his parents, his early company, glimpses of a life that looked so distant from hers. "They've had so little stability," she said softly, not turning. "But somehow, they feel safe here, with you." David's answer was quiet. "They're remarkable kids." Clara finally faced him, her expression gentle. "So are you, David, even if you don't believe it yet." That night, as David walked past the guest suite, he paused at the door. Inside, Clara lay sleeping peacefully, her sons curled beside her. The sound of their steady breathing spilled into the hallway. For years his house had been silent. Tonight, for the first time, it sounded like a home. Life inside the mansion slowly settled into a rhythm. The boys went to school in the mornings, returning with backpacks slung over their shoulders, eager to share stories of math quizzes and playground games. Evenings were filled with the smell of home-cooked meals. Clara insisted on helping in the kitchen whenever she felt strong enough, and the sound of laughter that drifted through once silent hallways. To an outsider, it might have looked like a family, but Clara knew better. One night, after the twins had gone to bed, she sat at the long dining table with a stack of papers spread before her, job applications, affordable housing listings, numbers scribbled in the margins. She was bent over the papers when David walked in. "What's all this?" he asked, frowning. She looked up, startled, then tried to gather the pages quickly. "Just options. I can't let this go on forever. You've done more than enough for us." David pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Clara, your health isn't steady yet. The doctors were clear. You still need treatment. The boys need stability." She shook her head. They need their mother to stand on her own 2 feet, not a life borrowed from someone else's generosity. Her voice was steady, but her eyes gave her away. Fear, gratitude, guilt. "The longer we stay here," she continued softly, "the harder it'll be when we leave." Upstairs in the hallway, Zach had crept out of his room to get a glass of water. He froze when he heard her words. His chest tightened. He tiptoed back into the bedroom where Lucas sat up groggily. "What's wrong?" Lucas whispered. "She wants us to leave," Zach said, his voice cracking. "Mom's looking for apartments." Lucas's stomach dropped. "But we can't. This is the first time she's smiled in months. The first time we've felt safe." Back downstairs, David leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You're not taking advantage, Clara. You're recovering. You're giving those boys a sense of home they desperately need." Clara's eyes met his, glistening. "And what happens when we walk out that door? When they've grown used to this life and it's all ripped away?" David wanted to answer, but the words stuck in his throat, because he knew what it felt like to lose everything in one instant. He had lived with that emptiness for years, and the thought of watching these 3 walk out of his life, it terrified him more than he cared to admit. That night, long after Clara had gone to bed, David wandered into the garage. He stood in the doorway of the room he had once kept locked, looking at the bicycle propped in the corner and the shelves of toys left behind by his son. His hand trembled as he touched the frame of a faded photo. He whispered to the silence, "Maybe they'd want me to live again." The words hung in the still air, fragile but real. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder if what he felt wasn't just charity or duty, but something far deeper, something he might not be able to let go of. Spring air drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of blooming flowers into the mansion. In the backyard, Zach and Lucas chased each other across the grass, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. David sat on the terrace with Clara, the 2 of them watching from a distance. "They look different now," Clara said softly, her eyes fixed on her sons. "Stronger, happier. I don't even recognise the worry lines on their faces anymore." "That's because they feel safe," David replied, "because they have you." Clara smiled faintly, but then her expression clouded. "And what happens when I take them away from this?" David turned toward her, studying the lines of worry carved into her face. "Why are you already planning to leave?" She sighed. "Because this isn't our life. This house, this stability, it doesn't belong to us. One day we'll have to pack up, and when that happens, it'll break their hearts. I can't let them get too used to something we can't keep." Her words struck David like a blow. He stared down at his hands, struggling to form the thoughts that had been circling his mind for weeks. Finally he looked up, his voice steady but carrying a tremor of vulnerability. "What if I don't want you to leave?" Clara's breath caught. Her eyes searched his, wary but full of unspoken questions. "David," he leaned forward, his tone quiet but firm. "You came into my life by chance. 2 boys trying to sell a bike in a park. I should have walked past, I didn't. And ever since that moment, I haven't been able to imagine this house without the sound of their laughter. Or without you." Clara's hands tightened around the mug she was holding. "You don't know what you're saying. You're a man with everything, and we're—" "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Don't reduce yourself to what you don't have. I see who you are. I see how those boys look at you. With love, with trust. And whether you believe it or not, I see how they've started looking at me too." Her eyes filled with tears. "David, I'm scared. I can't afford to hope for too much. Every time I do, life has a way of pulling it away again. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I'm scared too. But for the first time in years, I'm more afraid of losing something than of having it. For a long moment, the world seemed to fall silent, except for the boys' voices floating in from the yard. Clara blinked back tears, her lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. David took a slow breath. Don't think of this as charity. Don't think of it as temporary. Think of it as a chance. Stay, not as guests, not as a burden. Stay as family. Clara looked at him, stunned, her heart warring between doubt and the fragile spark of hope she had buried for too long. Out on the lawn, Zach shouted triumphantly as he tagged his brother, and both boys collapsed in laughter. Clara's eyes flicked to them, then back to David. She whispered, almost to herself, "If I stay, it changes everything." David held her gaze, then let it. The backyard was strung with simple white lights, their glow soft against the dusk. Clara stood near the steps of the terrace, her sons on either side of her, both in pressed shirts that made them look older than their 10 years. They were buzzing with nervous excitement, like they knew something big was about to happen. David joined them, no longer in a tailored suit, but in a plain shirt with the sleeves rolled up. For once, he didn't look like the man from the headlines. He just looked like a man standing with the people who mattered most to him. Clara's hand trembled slightly as he reached for it. "I never thought I'd find myself here," she whispered. David smiled softly. "Neither did I, but maybe this is where we were meant to end up." Instead of a minister or a judge, their neighbour, Mrs. Parker, stood before them with a small book. She was a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 houses down, known for her warm smile and the pies she left on porches during the holidays. Tonight, she was the one to officiate, at their request. It wasn't a grand ceremony, no cameras or headlines, just a handful of friends, Mrs. Winters, the boys, and the evening air thick with meaning. The twins took their roles seriously, holding a small velvet box between them. When it was time, Zach lifted the lid and Lucas handed David the ring. David slipped it gently onto Clara's finger, his voice steady. "When I met your boys, I thought I was helping them, but the truth is they saved me too. You brought life back into this house, into me, and I don't ever want to let that go." Clara's tears shimmered in the fading light as she placed a band on his hand. "You gave us safety when we had none, hope when we were empty, love when we least expected it. We'll never forget what you've given us, and now we give you us forever." Mrs. Parker's voice carried a warmth that matched the glow of the lights. "By the love you've spoken here today and the promises you've exchanged, I pronounce you husband and wife." The boys cheered so loudly it startled the neighbours across the fence. Lucas blurted out, "So, can we call you Dad now?" David's throat tightened, but he managed a laugh, bending down to pull them both into his arms. "It would be the greatest honour of my life." They tumbled together in a messy hug, Clara wrapping her arms around all 3 of them. Laughter and tears mixed as the new family stood there, bound not by circumstance but by choice. Later, after the guests had gone and the house grew quiet, David stepped into the garage. In the corner stood the red bicycle, the very one that had brought them together. Its paint was chipped, its tyres worn, but to him it was priceless. He wheeled it outside, leaning it against the porch where the boys could see it in the morning. A reminder, not of what they had lost, but of what they had found. As the night settled around him, David looked at the home behind him. For years, it had been a place filled with silence and shadows. Now it rang with laughter, smelled of dinners cooking, and held voices calling him something he thought he'd never hear again. Dad! And with that he finally believed what once felt impossible. This was only the beginning. True family isn't built by wealth or blood alone, but by kindness, sacrifice, and the courage to open your heart when life gives you a second chance. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for that. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.